The Netherlands and Belgium are two wonderful countries in Europe, known for a rich history, picturesque landscape, and of course video games. Well-established developers such as Guerrilla Games and Larian Studios are located here, studios behind titles such as Horizon Forbidden West and Baldur's Gate 3 respectively. But apart from developing video games, these two countries are the main setting for various games, many more than what you may know of. That's right, this is the fourth entry of this mini-series of video games set around the world, with this round taking place in the Low Countries. As per usual, in this list I only included games that have a recognizable location or landmark. I did not want to include a vague field of tulips and call it a day. They have to be real places in the Benelux in order to count, not just inspired by it. But apart from these very few exceptions, these are all the games set in the Netherlands and Belgium. Starting this journey from the north of the country, Friesland is the first region players can explore in the digital world, a region quite proud of their unique history and culture. Among her tales, the legendary hero Groot Appear is one of them, a farmer turned rebel turned warrior. The indie game Cross of the Dutchman lets the player fight off the Saxons in a reimagined Friesland landscape. The action-adventure game looks quite fun to play, and it proudly kickstarts this list. Moving a bit more south in the Drenthe region, Assen is home to its famous circuit that, among various events, is home to the MotoGP Grand Prix. The Dutch TT race is by far the circuit that hosted the most events in the category, over 75 races, and for good reason. The circuit is known for its technical layout, high challenge and well-balanced design, truly an honor to have it playable in so many motor racing games. But unfortunately, the Netherlands is not only home of heroes and races, but also some of the most fierce battles fought during the Second World War. There are many, and I mean many games set during Operation Market Garden, and here are some of them. In the Overijssel region, Battlefield 1942 has a multiplayer map in the city of Hellendoorn. Set during winter, the map is a bit simplistic in its depiction of the town, but a curious fact about it, as you probably have noticed in the background, is that the landscape is not plain, since the town is close to Germany and away from the Dutch polders. Another map of the game is set in the more famous city of Arnhem, in the region of Gelderland, where the allies' main mission was to capture the bridge over the Rhine River. In fact, games set during this battle are many, from Postscriptum to Call of Duty World War II, Brothers in Arms, Hell's Highway, and probably some more. It would be monotonous to describe the same battle over and over, but I will point out how each game has their own unique take when it comes to depicting Operation Market Garden. One last war location before moving west is the city of Nijmegen, just south of Arnhem, that serves as one of the main missions of the single-player campaign of Medal of Honor Airborne. To be honest, there is not much that makes this depiction that distinct from other games, but it is nice to see more locations added to the list in general. And speaking of Dutch locations that are quite recurring in video games, it comes as no surprise that the biggest city of the kingdom would have various iterations and depictions. That's right, we're talking about Amsterdam, the capital of the nation, home to the most well-known landmarks of Holland. In my research I found 5 games set here, the most recent depiction of the metropolis given by none other than Nintendo's Mario Kart 8, more specifically in the Booster Course Pack that ported various tracks from Mario Kart Tour on smartphone into the Switch game, including this one. The cartoony overall makes the Dutch city feel like it belongs to the Mario universe, while keeping landmarks such as the Damrak Street, the Montelmanstoren and the Central Station intact. The geography of the map is all over the place, but it has its charm and it is a lovely depiction. You can also get to drive inside the canals, cleaner than ones in real life. Overall, it is quite nice to race in Amsterdam Drift. Next up are the Call of Duty titles, more specifically Modern Warfare 2 and Cold War. In these two games there are 2 main missions taking place in Amsterdam, one in the current days and one in 1991. The level of detail these two depictions have is outstanding. It truly compares to real life, both when depicted in daylight and at nighttime. The missions themselves are fairly brief, a bit of a pity since the maps are so well modeled, from the biggest details such as how the Kirk to the street signs. Having visited the city numerous times, I can confidently say that these two games are spot on when it comes to depict the capital. But if you're less worried about the graphics and more about the gameplay, look no further to these two old shooters, Duke Nukem 3D and Amsterdam Doom. The former introducing its 20th anniversary edition and new chapter, with the very first level taking place in Amsterdam. The level named High Times, designed by Alain Bloom, is set in a pixelated Amsterdam, filled with canals and let's just say shops. As always, the gameplay is frenetic and fun, and it is a bit of a nice coincidence I made a video about the Duke not too long ago. What are the odds? The second game mentioned, Amsterdam Doom, is very unknown. The Utrecht-based company Davilex Games developed an FPS in 2000 that tried to emulate the Doom-like game experience, but in the Netherlands, not quite achieving much success. Still, the game is set entirely in Amsterdam, and famous locations such as the Rijksmuseum are visible by the player. But just at the outskirts of the city, we find Zaandam and its countryside, now home to modern architecture. In the multiplayer game War Thunder, the player can fight in the Dutch modern city by using various tanks and airplanes from many generations. The town's layout is not one-to-one, but it does feel realistic. Moving to the sea, we found the beach city of Zandvoort, that, as some of you may already know, has the famous circuit of the same name. The circuit Zandvoort is home to the Formula 1 Dutch Grand Prix, and it is one of the most uniquely shaped tracks, with its iconic high banks. It might not be as iconic as Assen, but it is definitely fun and exciting to race in the various racing games it appears in. But alright, we've explored North Holland quite a bit. It is time to move to the other half in order to explore the picturesque location of Kinkerdijk. This rural area is what many imagine when they think of the Netherlands. It was at least for the creators of Capcom vs NSK2 and Sly Cooper 3. The two games take a different approach at depicting the Dutch landscape. One does it in a 2D background and the other one in a 3D cel-shaded environment, both achieving a similar vibe and pleasant aesthetic. Next to Kinkerdijk, there is the big city of Rotterdam, splendidly depicted and explorable in Battlefield 5. The multiplayer map is crazy with details, depicting the city at its peak of war when it was the theater of a great island offensive. EA did not hold any punches when it came to recreate the biggest port of Europe in gaming, and the gameplay in the background says it all. The second biggest city in the Netherlands is home to two other games, being Hitman Contracts and Resistance Retribution. The former has a mission called Rendezvous located in the port itself, a mission beloved by fans. The latter PSP title is much less known, but it does have one of its missions set here, in a not so detailed Rotterdam. Next up is A2 Racer, that, as the name suggests, takes place along the A2 highway that crosses the nation from south to north. Many of the tracks take place in the highway itself, but some do take place in Dutch cities, including Amsterdam, Rotterdam and the new entry on this list, The Hague. The same developers of AmsterDoom gave racing games a shot, and while it is not perfect, A2 is here to stay. At last we move south to our last game in the Netherlands, MXGP 2019, that has the motocross circuit of Valkenswaard in the North Brabant. I'm quite clueless about this racing category, so I'm not going to pretend if I know the circuit is well remade or not, but from the looks of it, the track seems to be frenetic and exciting, excellent to finish off the list. And with that, we reach the border between the Netherlands and Belgium, two countries that have lots in common, including being both featured in many video games. So it is time to say goodbye to the Dutch, and hello to the Belgians. Belgium is generally divided into two major regions, the northern Dutch-speaking Flanders and the south French-speaking Wallonia. Carrying from the Netherlands, I'm thinking it makes sense to start off with the former region, and more specifically westwards in West Flanders. Here, many battles of the First World War took place, being depicted in various video games. Battlefield 1 offers two interest points in Belgium, Passendaele and Zeebrugge, both located in the Western Front. The former is a multiplayer map that takes place along the trenches built by the Germans and the Allies, trenches that were made to stop the breakthrough of the other side. The gameplay in the background already describes the horror such No Man's Land was. The latter is a single-player mission taking place on the port of the well-known city of Bruges, major port of Belgium. Here, the player does not exactly have the liberty to explore the area since they are on a secret mission, but there is time for the player to glance over the North Sea that touches the Belgian shores. As a footnote, the game Verdun does also have a map set in Belgium, named appropriately Flanders. Just like in Battlefield, the game lets the player fight trench warfare, this time a bit more accurately, more realistic, but nonetheless still challenging. A more artistic but true depiction of the First World War was given by Valiant Hearts and 1111 Memories Retold, both having a chapter set entirely in the Belgian city of Ypres. As the games rightfully depict under their colorful art styles, this was one of the most brutal battles during the war due to the usage of gas, something that has never happened before in such a great scale. But let us not remember Ypres only for the war, but as a beautiful green field filled with poppies and trees. The city and its surroundings are home to the Belgian Rally, part of continental and international competitions. The game WRC10 lets the player race across Flanders fields, taking sharp turns on the mud to race the clock and achieve the best time possible. And speaking of racing, how could we not mention the good old circuit of Zolder in Limburg, home to the Belgian Grand Prix in the 70s and 80s. This is not the most well-known circuit of Belgium, but it is historical and still playable in games like Project Cars. The layout is fairly simple, but it can still lead to some fun races. But if you're looking for something off-road, MXGP has also a circuit on this side of the border, more specifically in the town of Lommel, home to the MXGP of Flanders of the Motocross World Championship since 2008. Just within Flanders, but not quite, we found the capital of Belgium, Brussels. While Brussels is a lovely city, it is not the main setting for many games, but I did find two: The Adventures of Tintin, The Secret of the Unicorn, and AL2 Stormwovik. Tintin is perhaps the best known comic book character of all Europe, and its author Georges Remy is from Belgium. The video game is based on the movie that takes place in its first chapter in the Belgian capital. There's not much to explore per se, but the city is somewhat recognizable even if stylized. Il2 Stormovic instead offers a much more accurate depiction of the city, at least the one that can be seen from the sky. As you can see in the background, the World War II games lets players fly above the skies of Europe's capital, remade just like it was 80 years ago. From the sky to the land, we arrive in the French-speaking region of Wallonia, more specifically in the Liège province. The famous Spa-Francorchamps circuit is remade in countless driving games, and for good reason. Being home to the Belgian Grand Prix since 1985, Spa is the longest current track in the calendar, and it's an enjoyable journey to race across it. As stated in various F1 videos of mine, I consider Spa to be one of my favorite circuits. But at last, just like we did for the Netherlands, I do need to start mentioning games that take place during the Second World War, starting off with Battlefield 5's map of Hanut. The city is one of many that were on the front lines between the advancing Allies and the defending Germans. The scenery is similar to the French maps seen in previous videos, being beautiful but devastated by war. Foy, in the Belgian region of Luxembourg, is another of these towns, being visible in games like Day of Infamy and Call of Duty United Offensive. This time the battles are taking place during winter, in the last major battles of the Western Front before reaching the German mainland. Okay, not gonna lie, there are a ton of games that take place during the Ardennes Offensive, also known as the Battle of the Bulge, and listing all games that take place in a generic southern Belgium would take quite a bit. To mention a few, games like Battlefield 1942, Call of Duty World War II, Close Combat 4, War Thunder, and many more take place during this battle. Just like Normandy for the French video, most titles depict the geographic area a bit too generally, being the Ardennes forest not home to many landmarks. I've mentioned this 7-game series, but there are definitely more games set during this battle, and perhaps some that have more precise locations and maps. But just like we did earlier, I would like to close this section not with war games, but with something a bit more light-toned. The two last racing circuits present in Belgium that are playable in video games are Metet in Dirt Rally 2 and Bastogne in MXGP 2014. As stated, I'm not too big on dirt racing, but gameplay-wise these two circuits look fun, and there are splendid additions to finish off this very long list. Before jumping to the conclusion, I wanted to open up a small extra chapter to discuss titles set in Luxembourg and strategy games where the player can play as either nation. I'll keep it brief since there are not that many games, but they do make for a nice bonus segment. The 3 games set in Luxembourg that I found are Call of Duty World at War, Medal of Honor Allied Assault, and Resistance Retribution. The two former games are set during the Second Great War, more specifically in Dierkirch and Wiltz respectively, while the latter is set in a fictional future conflict. I do not have too much to comment, since, as you can see on screen, these are a bit rough depictions of the small European country, but nonetheless it is nice to see that some developers went out of their way to include Luxembourg into their projects, so kudos to you guys. If you are Luxembourgish, you know what games you gotta play now. Speaking of, there are games where the player can roam around the 3 different countries freely, such as Euro Truck Simulator 2 and Microsoft Flight Simulator. Fantastic games, do not get me wrong, but as you can imagine, I can't mention them in every single video I make. Same would go for games like FIFA, where yes, you would have all the stadiums in the Low Countries available, but if I were just to list them off, I would heavily dilute the final list. Strategy games that let you play as either the Netherlands or Belgium are many, though fewer than other European nations such as Spain and Italy, since they are a bit smaller. To change it up a bit, I'm going to discuss only the games where these countries play at their best. For the Netherlands, I think the best 2 strategy games to play are Empire Total War and Europa Universalis 4. Both games are set during and around the Dutch Golden Age, where the United Provinces were at their strongest both within the continent of Europe and abroad in Asia and in the Americas. In both titles, the Netherlands is powerful, but not too overpowered, making it for an interesting challenge. For Belgium, the best strategy game would be Victoria 2 or 3. Belgium as an independent state was formed in 1830, and a few decades after it became a relevant nation in European geopolitics. In Victoria 3 more specifically, Belgium is one of the tutorial nations of the game, since the small country is easy to manage but has potential to do many things abroad and within. And for Luxembourg? Well, not gonna lie, there's no game where Luxembourg can easily become a superpower just like that, but there are games where it's playable. I think the best chance the player has with Luxembourg is Crusader Kings 3 by playing as Lotharingia. You do start in the Holy Roman Empire, but the chances of expanding during the medieval times are much higher for a small duchy than any other time in history. There are of course more strategy games we could discuss, but we do have to finish this video sooner or later, so I'll leave the remaining research to you. So there you have them, all video games set in the Netherlands, Belgium, and yes, even Luxembourg. This list was longer than expected, and I hope you enjoyed it, especially if you live in one of these beautiful countries. This time around, finding good sources was a bit more challenging, but I do want to thank Rick046 that had an extensive playlist on YouTube of various games set in the Netherlands specifically. There are probably some games that I've missed, so do help me expand the list down in the comments below. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many Benelux times for watching today's video. It was a joy making this video, and to further expand the map of countries explored in what is now a series of videos. What nation or nations would you like me to do next? Vidux and Shipok suggested these ones, so now it is your turn to decide. I wish you a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci!